en esta festividad de Nuestra Señora de Guadalupe y le confiamos la vida de nuestros pueblos y la misión continental de la Iglesia. Por su intercesión, la fe cristiana fue convirtiéndose en el más rico tesoro del alma de los pueblos americanos y también en ese ethos americano que se muestra en la conciencia de dignidad de la persona humana, en la pasión por la justicia, en la solidaridad con los más pobres y sufrientes, en la esperanza, a veces contra toda esperanza.
Nearly 5 centuries have passed, yet this event endures in the hearts of millions, transcending divisions and uniting cultures with its timeless message. Its legacy, an ancient fabric miraculously intact, an image that defies scientific explanation, an intricate set of symbols that would bridge 2 worlds and countless cultures, and the transformation of a continent. This is the story of Our Lady of Guadalupe. When Pope John Paul II arrived in Mexico City for the canonization of Saint Juan Diego in July of 2002, millions of Mexican Catholics turned out. They lined the streets and filled the plazas. They came together to celebrate the making of the first indigenous saint of the Western Hemisphere, and the woman whose image has changed the course of history.
La canonización de San Juan Diego fue uno de los momentos más importantes porque sabía que era tan significativo no solamente para América Latina, no solamente para México, por supuesto, ni solamente para el continente americano, sino para el mundo entero.
Yo creo que era importantísimo para nuestro continente hacer ver que la Iglesia se construye en este continente desde un laico.
San Juan Diego para todos los mexicanos es un modelo a seguir. Él es uno de nosotros, él es un mexicano más, un verdadero hombre, un hombre de carácter, un hombre humilde, un hombre de fe, un hombre de oración, un hombre que, vamos, siempre estuvo dispuesto a morir a sí mismo para que Cristo reinara en su corazón.
The canonization of Saint Juan Diego is very significant because if the apparition of Our Lady of Guadalupe is not authentic, there is no Saint Juan Diego. So as part of that whole process of reviewing the life of Juan Diego, you have to validate, authenticate the apparition of Our Lady of Guadalupe. So that's one way in which his canonization is very significant.
When the Spanish conquistador Hernán Cortés landed in Mexico in 1519, he encountered a thriving Aztec empire that extended throughout Mexico's central plateau. According to an indigenous legend, the Aztec god Huitzilopochtli delivered a sign indicating where they should build their city at the site where an eagle, perched on a cactus, was seen devouring a snake. In 1324, the Aztecs founded a city named Tenochtitlan, which for them was the center of the universe, the place where the cycle of the universe was sustained by human sacrifices. Hernán Cortés formed a military alliance with native tribes opposed to the Aztecs. Amazingly, In just 2 short years, he succeeded in conquering the Aztec Empire. The Spaniards began constructing a new capital using materials from the recently destroyed Tenochtitlan, or present-day Mexico City. During the first stage of evangelization, a few missionaries attempted to convert the indigenous people. However, the task would prove to be a very arduous undertaking.
Y allí los frailes les dicen a los indios, creemos que vosotros no conocéis al Dios verdadero. Entonces uno de los sabios se levanta y dice, no hagáis más daño a nuestra gente, porque si como decís que nuestros dioses han muerto, tal vez nosotros debamos morir.
To understand the dramatic impact that Our Lady of Guadalupe has on the native population, you really have to put yourself in the position of these people at the collapse of the Aztec Empire and what their understanding of religion really was. We have to remember the horrific face of the Aztec deities that were there to receive the human sacrifices. We have to understand the history of the flower wars, in which battles were waged in order to obtain prisoners for sacrifice. So now what were the native peoples expecting the God of the Spaniards to be like, the victors to be like?
Para los indígenas, ver sus templos destruidos, sus ídolos, fue una catástrofe colosal para los indígenas. Pero nunca habían visto, nunca habían experimentado una peste como la que se dio poco después de la conquista. La mitad de la población indígena muere por la viruela. Los indígenas estaban verdaderamente en una catástrofe tal que los ancianos, los sabios, habían dicho que el mundo se iba a acabar.
Bishop Juan de Zumárraga was known as protector of the Indians. He bears the responsibility of defending the natives from cruel abuses carried out by the new Spanish government, including their widespread enslavement and murder. His courageous stand leads to at least one assassination attempt by corrupt members of the First Audiencia, or royal court in New Spain. Bishop Zumárraga, infuriated by the continued abuses and facing numerous threats against the lives of his fellow priests, decides upon drastic measures. In 1530, he excommunicates the members of the First Audiencia and abandons Mexico City.
Él decía de esta manera: sacerdotes de la Ciudad de México, desnuden los altares, consuman el Santísimo, nos largamos de esta Ciudad de México, que esta ciudad se quede sin Dios. Todos los sacerdotes de la Ciudad de México tuvieron que abandonar la ciudad e irse a Texcoco. Esta es la situación por la cual se estaba viviendo y era verdaderamente terrible y escalofriante.
Zumárraga wrote a letter to Emperor Charles V detailing the many abuses carried out against the native people.
Ya que, terminando la carta, ahí mismo escribe Fray Juan de Zumárraga: si Dios no provee con remedio de su mano, está la tierra en punto de perderse totalmente. Así que, mientras los indígenas y para los indígenas el mundo se va a acabar, para los españoles buenos como eran los misioneros, también.
The story of what happens next is passed down through the centuries by the humble man who experienced this event and who shared his encounter widely. Eventually, his testimony is captured in an ancient text known as the Nican Mapoa, written in the 16th century by the Indian scholar Antonio Valeriano.
Bueno, Nican Mapoa significa Nican aquí y Mapoa se narra, se cuenta. Es una frase muy frecuente en textos antiguos. Puedo decir, después de 60 años de estudiar la lengua náhuatl, que está en un náhuatl clásico. El que escribió eso conocía muy bien la lengua. Y más aún, puedo decir que es una obra poética muy bella.
The Nican Mapoa recounts the story of Juan Diego, a Catholic convert and widower. His Indian name was Cuauhtlatoatzin, meaning eagle who speaks divine things. Some skeptics have cast doubt on Juan Diego's historical existence, a claim denied by Miguel Leon Portilla, a premier authority on Aztec language and culture.
cuando lo canonizó el Papa Juan Pablo II, se dijo que no constaba que existiera Juan Diego. Bueno, yo creo que sí constaría. Se hicieron unas averiguaciones, ya ha entrado el siglo XVII, y allí dijeron muchísimos que lo conocieron, a su mujer también. Y por consiguiente, a mí me parece que dudar de que existiera Juan Diego, pues es un extremo ya.
In the apparitions in Mexico of Our Lady of Guadalupe, like many other apparitions in the world, oftentimes Our Lady will appear to very humble people. And in this case, to the Indian Juan Diego, a humble man, a very simple man of simple faith, because those who have a heart like children and who are open to God can receive this message.
On December 9th, 1531, Juan Diego walks along the western side of Tepeyac Hill on his way to catechism at a Franciscan mission just north of Mexico City.
Ese sábado, 13 caña, a punto de celebrarse el solsticio de invierno, él ahí ve la transformación de todo este cerro del Tepeyac, que de por sí era un cerro pedregoso, polvoso, salitroso, signo de muerte donde no crecía la vida. Ahora está lleno de la vida divina, y dentro de todo esto se hace el silencio. Se hace el silencio para escuchar lo primero que sale de la boca de la Virgen Santísima. Lo primero que sale, lo primero que dice la Virgen de Guadalupe es el nombre del laico indígena, Macehual. Juanito, Juan Diegotzin. Juanito, Juan Dieguito.
According to the account in the Nican Mapoa, the woman identifies herself as the mother of the true God and asks that a sacred house be constructed in her honor on Tepeyac Hill. She asks Juan Diego to bring this message to Bishop Zumárraga.
Pues bien, Juan Diego va con el obispo para pedir que se pudiera construir esta casita sagrada. Cuando llega el obispo, son los criados los que lo dejan afuera horas, hasta que por fin puede llegar ante el obispo, le dice todo lo que... Y obviamente el obispo en ese momento, en su responsabilidad apostólica, pues no podía simplemente dar crédito a una persona que llegara y simplemente le dijera que vio a la Virgen y que está hablando con ella.
No te cuinoe, ahí no pa' acá, no más igual y notla, in matlotolsin.
Juan Diego returns to Tepeyac Hill empty-handed. The woman asks him to return to Bishop Zumárraga with the same message. He obeys, and this time the bishop asks for a sign.
Juan Diego está allá con la Virgen, le dice que lo recibió el obispo y que necesita una señal. La Virgen le dice, ven mañana lunes y yo te doy la señal.
On Monday, Juan Diego fails to show up. His uncle Bernardino is gravely ill, facing death. He asks Juan Diego to find a priest to administer last rites. On December 12, 1531, Juan Diego sets out towards Tlatelolco to find a priest for his uncle.
El 12 de diciembre, Juan Diego capta que hace muchísimo frío, helaba, toma una tilma que se anuda al cuello y se envuelve el cuerpo con ello. Por eso es larga, porque tiene que envolverse con la tilma.
In a hurry, Juan Diego tries to avoid meeting the Virgin. He goes around Tepeyac Hill, but the woman comes down from the top of the hill and cuts him off. Juan Diego explains why he's in a hurry, but the woman tells him to have no more fear, that she holds him in the fold of her mantle and in the cradle of her arms, and she assures him that his uncle is well.
La Virgen de Guadalupe, cuando le está diciendo a Juan Diego que su tío ya sanó, en ese mismo momento ella se aparece en Tulpetlac, en la casa de Juan Diego, donde se encuentra postrado por la enfermedad Juan Bernardino. Es ahí donde ella entrega su nombre completo. A Juan Bernardino le dice, yo soy la perfecta siempre Virgen, Santa María de Guadalupe.
Juan Diego asks her to honor him by letting him be her messenger. Our Lady of Guadalupe now instructs him to climb to the top of Tepeyac Hill and gather up in his tilma all the flowers he finds. Upon reaching the summit, Juan Diego is amazed to find extraordinary flowers in full bloom. These flowers would be the sign for the bishop.
Llega a la casa de Fray Juan de Zumarraga, pasa, Juan Diego le explica todo lo que aconteció, todo lo que sucedió y le da las rosas, las flores. Hazme el favor de recibirlas, le dice Juan Diego. Y en ese momento, delante del obispo, se plasma la imagen de la Virgen de Guadalupe en la tilma de Juan Diego.
This remarkable image, inexplicable in its style, luminous colors and imagery, would change the course of history for the entire continent. Today, that sacred house asked for by the Virgin is now the Basilica of Our Lady of Guadalupe, the most visited Catholic shrine in the world. Each year, millions of pilgrims come to celebrate their faith and the miraculous image of Our Lady of Guadalupe.
Creo que la gente encuentra una gran satisfacción porque encuentra a Santa María de Guadalupe, no una imagen que se pintó, no con una imagen que se describió, sino ella misma quiso quedarse en esa imagen.
The shrine of Our Lady of Guadalupe is a source of inspiration for the faithful. They come here to find the comfort of their mother and to pray for her intercession.
A lot of the pilgrimages that I've done, a lot of the people are from the United States. They don't have any Latino heritage or anything, but they've always wanted to go. And the blessings that they receive, I've seen people start to pray the rosary again. People have gone to confession for the first time in many years when they've gone to the shrine. Spiritual direction, the healing of marriages, reconciliations between family members and so forth. It's really a tremendous blessing that takes place there. And I think that Our Lady's presence in that tilma still to this day has a lot to do with that.
The first time I went to the Shrine of Our Lady of Guadalupe and approached the tilma, I knew I was entering into the presence of something sacred and holy. The supernatural presence of the icon made an impression on me. I was immediately touched by the devotion of the people. I mean, it was an incredible experience of their tenderness in their approach to Mary as their mother. And from that moment on, I've had a loving experience of Mary.
The image of Our Lady of Guadalupe holds many unsolved mysteries. The first mystery is its very existence. A 1946 study by the National Autonomous University of Mexico confirmed that the tilma is made of ixtli, or azote agave fibers, from the cactus plant.
Y esto es muy higroscópico. Es un material que es muy fácil de atacar y que absorbe muchísimo la humedad. Los que manejan las fibras de agave saben que no es un material durable. Ya en el siglo XVI estaban sorprendidos. Y a lo largo de todo, de los casi 500 años que tenemos la imagen con nosotros, siempre ha habido asombro, siglo con siglo siguen asombrándose de que permanezca.
Así pues, es realmente inexplicable que una tela hecha de fibras de agave dure tanto tiempo, en primer lugar por el ataque de los insectos. Y por otro lado, porque el ambiente en la Basílica de Guadalupe es un ambiente sumamente húmedo y salitroso.
You know, I think it's very important to examine miracles in a scientific way and to look for an explanation in the natural world, which everybody tends to do and wants to do. And then we discover rather miraculous things that can be answered from ordinary experience.
In the 18th century, a scientist named Dr. Bartolacci commissioned the creation of two works similar to the Guadalupe image. These paintings were also created on agave cloth and were placed in locations around the Basilica of Guadalupe.
Y a los 10 años más o menos ya verdaderamente estaba desastrosa. La tuvieron que quitar porque había perdido todo su colorido y ya la tela estaba completamente desgastada.
The survival of the tilma is even more amazing when one considers that it was left completely unprotected for more than a century.
La imagen de la Virgen de Guadalupe estuvo 116 años sin ninguna protección, sin ningún vidrio, expuesta a este clima tan tremendo, porque los datos nos dicen que el agua cuando se inundaba la ciudad llegaba hasta el altar dentro de la ermita.
La Virgen de Guadalupe ha soportado humedades, ha soportado velas, humo de candelas, ha soportado tantas personas que con sus manos la tocaban y con los rosarios la tocaban y con las imágenes la tocaban. Imposible que hubiera durado.
Many aspects of the image defy logic and science. The tilma has a seam running down its center, rendering the cloth a poor canvas choice. But researchers are astonished to discover that the very flaws of the tilma's fabric reveal the genius of the image.
Lo maravilloso de la imagen de la Virgen de Guadalupe es que cada, podríamos llamar, defecto de la fibra del tejido queda en el lugar apropiado. En el labio de la Virgen hay un nudito que es lo que le da volumen. En la nariz ves las fibras y esas mismas fibras ayudan a que tenga este volumen, lo cual calcularlo está imposible.
The tilma also lacks any preparation or imprimatura, a necessary step when painting on fabric.
Sí necesitas ese apresto, esa base de preparación para que los colores, donde tú los pongas con el pincel, ahí se queden. Y cuando vemos la imagen, vemos verdaderamente la tela que se ve a través de los hilos. Porque si tú a una tela le echas el pigmento, del tipo de pigmento que tú le quieras poner, ¿qué es lo que pasa? Que como no tiene esa base de preparación, se te va a escurrir.
The lack of preparation is made clear by a startling realization. The same image appears on both front and back of Juan Diego's tilma.
Que la misma imagen que vemos en la parte delantera está en la parte de atrás, como que la imagen se hubiera pasado atrás o se hubiera impreso de alguna forma en los dos lados de forma simultánea. Y por la parte de atrás hay unos detalles que sorprenden porque, por ejemplo, la Virgen tiene un medallón en el cuello. Considero que cualquier artista hubiera pintado el cuello y sobre el cuello habría pintado el medallón. Pero el medallón también se ve en la parte de atrás. Hay que considerar que en la imagen guadalupana no se ven pinceladas. Cuando se ve la imagen con grandes ampliaciones, se ve el color como si estuviera directamente impregnado en las fibras, no se ven huellas de pincel. De modo que todo esto pareciera indicar como que todo el color, toda la imagen se hizo de una sola vez y por los dos lados.
Si vas a la basílica y ves la imagen de la Virgen, ves esos colores, cómo llegan, los colores vibrantes. Una pintura, ¿qué le haces? Le pones un barniz de protección a tu pintura para proteger los colores. Pero lo asombroso es que la imagen de la Virgen no tiene barniz de protección, no tiene base de preparación.
In 1795, an accident nearly destroys the tilma. A worker cleaning the glass encasement clumsily spills nitric acid on the image.
Se hubiera esperado que la tela se hubiera desbaratado por el contacto con el ácido. Sin embargo, es curioso, por decirlo menos, que no le pasó nada. Quien quiera que vea la imagen guadalupana puede ver que del lado derecho está el escurrimiento del ácido e incluso se ve que pasó por zonas donde hay color y ni siquiera el color se llevó.
Among the many wonders of the Guadalupe apparition are new discoveries being made into the image present in her eyes. Jose Aste Tonsman is a Peruvian engineer and an expert in digital image processing. In the late 1970s, he began applying his studies to the tilma.
En realidad fue un trabajo de mucho tiempo y lo que yo descubrí fue que hay 13 personas reflejadas en los ojos, en las córneas de los ojos de Nuestra Señora de Guadalupe.
In the human eye, the cornea reflects the image in front of us. Both eyes will show the same image but different sizes. This phenomena is precisely what Tonsman found when magnifying both eyes. Each eye contained mirror images of the same scene.
Utilizando estadísticas podemos comprobar de que las imágenes que están en ambos ojos, que están en las mismas personas, aunque de distintos tamaños, pero sí en las mismas posiciones y tomando puntos, podemos comprobar de que hay una correlación altísima entre las figuras en los dos ojos.
The incredible devotion inspired by Our Lady of Guadalupe and her miraculous image can be traced back to the very first years following her apparition to Saint Juan Diego. Despite ongoing tension with the Spanish colonial government, the apparition triggers one of the greatest conversions to the Catholic faith in history.
Esto obviamente va extendiéndose de una manera, pero como pólvora por toda los territorios, y va haciéndose una de las conversiones más grandes, sin precedentes en toda la historia de la Iglesia. En 7 años se logran 9 millones de conversiones. Eran días en los cuales los misioneros tenían que bautizar 14,000 personas en un solo día.
This marks a difference in the type of evangelization between the New World and the Old World. What had been the typical model was one baptized the prince or the king or the queen, and the followers followed his decision as to the religion of the kingdom. But in the New World, what happened with Juan Diego and Our Lady of Guadalupe was a conversion beginning among the people that then filtered up instead of a conversion at the top, which filtered down.
The native people are drawn by Juan Diego's powerful encounter with Our Lady of Guadalupe, but they are also amazed by an image that reveals the Christian faith through symbols they could understand. In Aztec society, codices or pictorial manuscripts were an essential means of communication.
Toda la imagen de la Virgen de Guadalupe, toda, es un códice. Ellos saben interpretar y leer perfectamente todos los conceptos que ella transmite a través de su imagen. Este códice es grande, así que como todos los códices grandes tienen que ser puestos en el suelo y los ancianos rodeaban el códice para poderlo leer de diferentes ángulos. Algo así sucede con la Virgen de Guadalupe. Una de las primeras cosas que ven los indígenas es este manto azul verdoso que solamente el emperador podía portar. Cuando observan este manto azul, que significa el cielo, verde, que significa la vida, ella es una emperatriz. Este listón oscuro que está arriba, esta cinta oscura. Nosotros en América Latina decimos, una mujer está encinta, significa que está embarazada. Y ellos ven esta única flor de 4 pétalos, pero en posición X. Así que inmediatamente ellos entendieron que es madre de Dios. Solamente las doncellas, las vírgenes, tenían el pelo hacia abajo, sin ningún tipo de trenzado. Todo hacia abajo, bien peinado. Eso significaba virginidad. Y si vemos cómo está esta mujer de pie, un pie está bien puesta en la luna y la otra está flexionada a manera de paso de danza. Así que ellos perfectamente entienden que ella está danzando. Y los indígenas al danzar significa orar.
The image also contained symbolism that would transform the worldview of the indigenous people. Their new understanding of God and of love would help eliminate the long-standing practice of human sacrifice.
El sacrificio para los aztecas era un acto también central de la religión. Y yo creo que si entendemos, ellos creen que el mundo, el universo, está en peligro de acabarse. Y entonces es necesario fortalecer al sol. Piensa que el sol es la divinidad misma. Y para fortalecerlo, pues hay que ofrecerle lo que es vital en el ser humano, la sangre.
Like European iconography, Our Lady of Guadalupe is standing on the moon. But for the indigenous mind, the moon represented the home of the omnipotent God.
Estos rayos del sol a las espaldas la Virgen de Guadalupe. Ahora entendemos por qué la luna negra. Ahora la entendemos. ¿Por qué? Porque toda ella es un eclipse. Ella está eclipsando, está superando al sol. Si recordamos que para los indígenas el templo mayor de Tenochtitlan, donde sacrificaban tantos corazones y sangre, era precisamente para alimentar a los dioses y a todo este universo, principalmente el sol. La Virgen de Guadalupe está pisando la luna negra, es decir, está llegando al hogar del Dios omnipotente. Y ahora entiendo la gran conversión de los indígenas, porque ella, hagan de cuenta, lo que está diciendo es esto: no es tu corazón, no es tu sangre lo que alimenta a esos dioses, no, es el verdaderísimo y único Dios y Señor. Es su cuerpo, es su sangre, es su ser, es su corazón lo que te alimenta. Eso se llama Eucaristía.
The many symbols in the image of Our Lady of Guadalupe led to millions of conversions. This powerful symbolism was further reinforced by a major festival called Panquetzalistli, celebrated around the winter solstice, which in the Julian calendar took place on December 12th, the same date as the apparition of Our Lady of Guadalupe.
12 de diciembre, exactamente el día del solsticio de invierno. Exactamente cuando los indígenas celebraban incluso la gran fiesta de Panquetzalistli. Los misioneros decían, es como la Pascua indígena. Ahora entiendo perfectamente el momento que escogió Dios a través de la Virgen de Guadalupe para encontrarse con el ser humano. Hagas de cuenta que la Virgen de Guadalupe le dice a los indígenas, yo los entiendo. Yo entiendo los sacrificios humanos, porque yo estuve delante de la cruz de mi hijo. Yo sé lo que es un sacrificio humano porque yo lo viví, yo lo sufrí. Yo estuve delante de mi hijo viendo cómo derramaba su sangre y ofrecía su cuerpo para la salvación de todos. Ya no más sacrificios. Mi hijo es el único y eterno sacrificio.
With Our Lady of Guadalupe, what we find is actually the transformation of a culture according to new norms, validating its own heritage and its own history. Good example of this can be seen in Mexico in 1544, when Mexico experienced one of the worst droughts in its history. Typically, the Aztecs responded to such a situation by the massive sacrifice of many young children. After Our Lady of Guadalupe in 1544, there was a massive pilgrimage of young children to the shrine of Our Lady of Guadalupe. So the transformation from a culture, we might say, of death to a culture of life.
Our Lady of Guadalupe is often called La Morenita, a reference to her darkened complexion that makes her the perfect symbol of a mixed people.
Así que al hablarle a la Virgen Santísima como la Morenita, significa evidentemente que vemos en su color de piel este mestizaje. Obviamente ella lleva nuestra sangre, nuestro color, ella lleva nuestra imagen, nuestra pintura, y nosotros la llevamos también.
Las apariciones de la Virgen de Guadalupe constituyen el acontecimiento fundante de los pueblos americanos. La Virgen de Guadalupe se presenta con el rostro mestizo. Es una Virgen que habla de la conjunción, del encuentro, de la conjunción de ambos pueblos, de los españoles con las más variadas etnias indígenas.
St. John Paul II referred to Our Lady of Guadalupe as the perfect model of enculturation. This means that she comes to the indigenous people in their own customs and imagery. And in fact, in her face, the mestiza face, they see in her an affirmation of their human dignity, their human worth. And of course, the response is overwhelming.
A finales del siglo XIX es más fuerte que nunca y entonces es declarada la madre mestiza del pueblo mestizo. Esto la convierte realmente en el símbolo nacional.
Es un emblema nacional. Es igual de emblema como, por ejemplo, el águila en el escudo de la bandera mexicana, el águila sobre el nopal.
Even during the Mexican Revolution of 1910, Emiliano Zapata and his troops entered Mexico City carrying a banner of Our Lady of Guadalupe. Despite Mexico's Catholic identity and the Guadalupan devotion, church-state tensions reach a peak during the 1920s. In an effort to suppress the faith of Mexico's citizens, the government set out to destroy the church's most important symbol.
Durante la persecución religiosa, Calles y el líder obrero Morones estaban obsesionados con destruir la religión católica y la Iglesia Católica. Entonces ellos pensaron que destruyendo la imagen de la Virgen de Guadalupe, el trabajo se iba a facilitar.
In 1921, an agent working for the government places a bomb hidden in a basket of flowers directly under the tilma.
Esta bomba formada por cartuchos de dinamita explotó, rompió el mármol de la zona donde estaba puesta. La onda expansiva rompió vidrios a 150 metros de distancia de las casas enfrente de la basílica y realmente es inexplicable que el vidrio de la imagen ni siquiera se haya roto.
In the following years, the persecution of Catholics only increases. This leads to a rebellion against the repressive government known as the Cristero War. These Catholic freedom fighters choose Our Lady of Guadalupe as their patron and their inspiration.
Calles querían acabar con la religión católica y nosotros era lo que peleábamos, la religión católica. Era lo que peleábamos. Cuando agarraba uno el gobierno, ¿y ustedes por qué pelean? Por Cristo Rey. ¡Viva Cristo Rey! Santa María de Guadalupe, era lo que les decíamos.
Many victims of the Cristero War flee to the United States. This mass immigration serves to increase the already budding devotion to Our Lady of Guadalupe outside Mexico's borders.
The Cristero imprint on Mexicans coming to the United States was rather large because a lot of the people who were exiled from Mexico during the Cristero period came to Los Angeles, and they wore it on their shirt sleeves, and that was, if you were a Mexican, you were a Guadalupano. And so the devotion has been very strong. It's spread now throughout the United States.
In 1941, delegates from the 20 American republics came to the shrine of Our Lady of Guadalupe in Mexico City to pray for peace amidst the horrors of the Second World War. Archbishop John Cantwell of Los Angeles led a delegation from the United States. The Mexican Church was so grateful for Archbishop Cantwell's presence and support that they gifted the Los Angeles Archdiocese with a relic of St. Juan Diego's miraculous tilma. To this day, it remains the only such relic in the United States. In recent years, under the auspices of the Knights of Columbus, the relic has passed through numerous American cities and been venerated at large Guadalupan celebrations in both Phoenix and Los Angeles.
In speaking of a new world, what we're really talking about is the unity of different peoples and different cultures to create something that did not exist before. In the United States, for example, a country is a great melting pot of many immigrant groups, of many ethnicities, of many religious traditions coming together to forge a new society. This is primarily the message of Our Lady of Guadalupe, that regardless of differences, there is a basic unity of human dignity and a respect for different cultures. And if we maintain that, we can actually create something new.
I have my passion for surfing, and I have my passion for Our Lady, especially Our Lady of Guadalupe. When I was a young man, I was raised in a very difficult, tumultuous family setting, and I really bit onto the culture and the bad things of the culture. So I got involved with a lot of drugs and a lot of promiscuity. It was after reading a book about the Blessed Virgin Mary that I really got what I call the divine 2x4 experience. God just hammered me with the truth, and I fell madly in love with him and with Our Lady and with the Catholic Church. I do consider myself a Guadalupano. She's my mother, and I feel united with those that I don't even speak their same language. A mother always unites her children, and that's a big part, I think, of Our Lady of Guadalupe.
The spread of devotion to Our Lady of Guadalupe across the American continent is captured in this beautiful and idyllic shrine dedicated in her name. La Crosse, Wisconsin is a far cry from bustling Mexico City, but it is here that a new generation of Guadalupanos is being formed.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
After the Synod on America, the Church in America, in which St. John Paul II underlined so powerfully the importance of Our Lady of Guadalupe for the living of the faith in the whole continent, North America, Central America, South America, then I understood that it should be a shrine to Our Lady under her title, Our Lady of Guadalupe.
We have people coming from everywhere. I've had people as far away as China. The ones that are always the most interesting are the ones who simply see the roadside sign and just come in.
What I hear most of all from the pilgrims is that when they come here, the minute they come up on the grounds, they have a sense of peace and they're inspired to pray. The heart of the message is very simple, that she wants to show to her children God's love for them.
I've always been infatuated with the story of Our Lady of Guadalupe and her message and St. Juan Diego, and we've always tried to share that with our children, and we happened to kind of just stumble upon it. Then we found out they were building this church, so we've kept coming now for the last 8 or 9 years.
I came from California, from San Diego, to commemorate this shrine because she is Our Lady of the Americas. And she's really a lady for all of us, for those from the tip of Argentina all the way up to the United States and Canada. So we look to her for guidance, for inspiration in our daily lives.
The shrine in La Crosse has opened new hearts to the message of Guadalupe and has united people of all ethnic backgrounds in their common faith.
I can speak to Our Lady of Guadalupe's effect in the local community and with the people who come here. It's a community of believers. And I think that the propagation of devotion to Our Lady of Guadalupe beyond the Hispanic community will simply bring more understanding that we're all in this together. The whole thing initially was funded by well-meaning Anglos, non-Hispanics, who simply caught the message of what the Pope was saying and what the Bishop, now Cardinal Burke, was saying and went with it. You have to see it to even believe this could happen.
As patroness of the Americas, Our Lady of Guadalupe also inspires Canadians, and in a special way, she speaks to the First Nations communities.
When I read that story and how as early as December 1531, when Our Lady appeared to an indigenous person in Mexico, speaking his language and taking, in fact, the complexion of indigenous children, I was just overwhelmed and deeply touched. First of all, she takes the complexion of our people and how she knew of the particular distress that the people were in, how they were treated less than human, but how she came to raise their dignity. And when you stop and think, when Our Lady appeared to St. Juan Diego, at the time his age was 57 years old. And so she appears to elders, which elevates then the significance of elders in all our cultures as indigenous peoples.
Inspired by the mestiza face of Our Lady, Nicholas began touring First Nation communities with the Guadalupe image, sharing Juan Diego's encounter and example of an enculturated evangelization that respects indigenous culture and experience.
When I first saw the missionary image of Our Lady Guadalupe, which is Canadian, I fell in love with her immediately, but I was overcome by the fact that this was the face of Our Lady, of the Mother of Jesus, and the only place in the world where she has left behind her face was in Mexico. Each summer, I bring the missionary image of Our Lady Guadalupe to this area of New Brunswick and go around to not only First Nation communities, but non-Native communities as well, to actually share the story. And so when you hear words of people who are walking wounded, and then later on you see them rejoice, they say, "Thank you very much for bringing the story of Our Lady Guadalupe to us." And there are many, many stories over this past 8 years that I've taken the image around, where she has brought great comfort to people.
The fact that Our Lady of Guadalupe communicates with a poor person like Juan Diego is a message of what we call now option for the poor, which Pope Francis is talking about all the time. Our church must be a church of the poor for the poor. Evangelical poverty, simplicity and humility, and that is a very strong message for today.
While devotion to Guadalupe remains most widespread in the Western Hemisphere, it is increasingly a global phenomenon. At the National Shrine of Our Lady of Guadalupe in Manila, Filipino Catholics continue a centuries-long tradition.
Our Lady of Guadalupe has a great impact on the Filipinos. The devotion was brought in from Mexico through Spanish missionaries. And such that by 1935, the Holy Father, Pius XI at that time, decided to declare Our Lady of Guadalupe as the patroness of the Philippines. There are two things that were originally, I think, was an inspiration for the people to be in love with Our Lady of Guadalupe. One is the color of the Blessed Mother Guadalupe is an Indio, and we were called Indios by the Spaniards. The second is that the one to whom he appeared was also an Indio, Juan Diego. I think that the impact of the devotion to Our Lady is not only on families, but on society in general.
Hay algo casi como simbólico hoy, que la iglesia, la parroquia más al norte de Alaska está dedicada a Nuestra Señora de Guadalupe. También providencialmente, pocos años de ser elegido papa, el cardenal Bergoglio creaba una nueva parroquia en Buenos Aires consagrada y dedicada a San Juan Diego.
La Virgen de Guadalupe no solamente es el puente entre el cielo y la tierra, sino que también es el puente entre todas las culturas. Así es que gracias a su amor, ella nos une.
Until recently, Our Lady of Guadalupe has been seen almost exclusively as a Mexican phenomenon or a Latin American, Hispanic phenomenon. But we need to open our horizon a bit. We have to understand that she is the patroness of the Philippines. And so she reaches the hearts of millions of Asians. We have to remember that at the time of the appearance of Our Lady of Guadalupe, New Spain existed throughout the western part of the United States. And so she is an apparition for the United States as well as for Mexico.
Our Lady of Guadalupe is the mother of the Sisters of Life. We process to her every night at the end of our night prayer throughout our convent, singing the Salve Regina, acknowledging her as our mother. Unlike her other apparitions, there's nothing like the Guadalupe apparition, because when she came here, she came simply as a mother. She didn't exhort the people to prayer, to conversion, to fasting. That wasn't her message to these people. Her message was a message of love. She came with the assurances of love that I am here. I am your mother.
In my confessional in Philadelphia, I hear confessions every Sunday night. And right outside my confessional is a beautiful mosaic of Our Lady of Guadalupe. I can see through the door the number of people who stop at the shrine of Our Lady of Guadalupe and pray as they prepare for confession. And I think that's kind of symbolic of the role of Our Lady of Guadalupe leading us further into our Christian life, day by day, asking us for constant transformation, change, and conversion.
Our Lady of Guadalupe has been referred to as the mother of the civilization of love. And so what is the motherly message of Our Lady of Guadalupe? It is one of concern, of compassion, of love for all members of society, even the poorest, even the outcast. And so if the person is created out of love, for love, only a civilization of love is worthy of human dignity. And this is fundamentally the message of Our Lady of Guadalupe.
Juan Diego, al acoger el mensaje cristiano, sin renunciar a su identidad indígena, facilitó el encuentro del mundo, de dos mundos, una mente unida a la Virgen de Guadalupe, cuyo rostro mestizo expresa su maternidad espiritual.
For almost 5 centuries, Our Lady of Guadalupe has united bitter enemies, endured as a symbol of hope, and defied scientific explanation, becoming the patroness of the Americas. Today, her presence is as real as it was in 1531, when Juan Diego first walked up Tepeyac Hill and encountered the woman millions would come to call our mother.